So this is the daily light rope. There was a time as a kid I went in the summertime to my uncle's farm. And, we remember things differently than they actually were, I guess, as kids. I know that because we used to travel in the summertime, like I said, from California to Wyoming. There's lots of Wyoming that's flat and prairie-like, but there's the western Wyoming on the Idaho border is a beautiful, beautiful valley called Star Valley, and it's south of Jackson Hole along the Snake River before, or not the Snake, but the Salt River before it joins the Snake in up by Jackson, or no, by Alpine actually. Anyway, in that place, I used to love to do that. And the memory, I remember there was one year that the day school was out, literally the day, we rushed to the train station in Martinez, which wasn't very far from our house, which is on Suisun Bay. Jumped on the train and went to Ogden, and then in Ogden, my grandfather, grandmother, whoever picked us up in the car and loaded all of our bags and everything. And we went and spent 6 weeks, 8 weeks. I don't remember. It always seemed like all summer, but then there were other summers that seemed like I had 2 summers, one there and then one when we got home, because summer was from the first week of June to the first week of September, so it was a full 3 months, and there might have been 2 summers, 6 weeks and 6 weeks. I don't know. But the funny thing about the memory is I would swear that every summer without fail, we got out of school, we went and got on the train and went to Star Valley. I talked to my mom about this, and she said we only actually used the train 2 or 3 times, maybe 4, which is, very contradictory to my memory. It seemed like it was every summer. And I remember driving sometimes and so forth, and the way I would describe that is every summer, got out of school, got on the train, went there, stayed there all summer long, and then at the end of the summer, my dad would drive the car, because we only had one car in those days, drive the car to Star Valley, pick us up, and spend a couple weeks, because he had a couple weeks vacation and he couldn't spend, as long up there as we did. What I've learned later is that wasn't always exactly how it worked, and of course, as you'd expect. But none of that's the reason I'm talking about this today in Light Rope. That place, Star Valley, was so critical to my formation as a child. As you know, if you've read my book Tightrope of Depression, there was a lot of angst in my growing up. I had a mom who was determined to make sure that I kept the commandments of my church. She was determined to make sure, no matter what, that I grew up doing what was right and good. And she enforced that with a lot of beatings. And I remember feeling sometimes like every day I got spanked. And spanked would be a gentle way of describing it, because the implements were, varied. Shoes and serving spoons that left, black and blue welts on my legs and back and wherever they landed. My butt was the normal target, but of course, a squirming kid, you miss, and it lands wherever it lands. So that kind of physical abuse and enforcement for righteousness was a constant and regular feature, along with a lot of screaming, swearing, name calling, and so forth that my mom inflicted on me, and as well as some other punishments. But this isn't about that either. Going to Star Valley in the summer became a refuge, because there I can only remember getting whipped 2 or 3 or 4 times in all the years with a handful of willow branches, and slapped and stuff a few times, but it was nothing compared to what happened at home. And I've often reflected on that since and wondered why, and made up my own reasons. Maybe my mom didn't want to be seen being so abusive. Maybe because we're out in the country, she figured we couldn't get in as much trouble or whatever, or maybe she just was busy. Because the real reason we went there wasn't for vacation, it was to work on the farm. I found out later my mom felt an obligation to help her dad with the summer, and her brother, who was buying the farm, with the summer farm work, which is very heavy. It was a dairy farm, and so in the summertime, they grow barley and alfalfa to feed the animals during the winter. Feed the cows, to milk the milking cows and the calves and the horses and all that stuff. So I think what I was told later is that was really the reason, is because she felt like she needed to go help with the haying. They call it the haying, which is mowing and putting into bales of alfalfa. But for me as a boy, that was the ideal sort of place. There were creeks and there were pastures and there were willows and there were swamps and there were, swampy areas of the pasture where there was, the water table was high and so it was swampy, and it would rain and there was thunder and lightning on the hills, and the valley was just gorgeous. But I think it was made more gorgeous because I've been back since and looked at it, and it's pretty, but it's not more staggering than Banff or Switzerland or something like that. But in my heart, it holds a special place, and it evokes this powerful emotion. And so for me, that's a holy and sacred place. And I had an experience yesterday speaking to someone I was interviewing for my book. And she's a coach, and she had an equine, or an experience with horses recently, where horses were used to reflect our emotion because of how we feel, and they're sensitive to that and so forth. And part of my growing up and work on the farm included a lot of horse work. So every morning I would have to go get the horse and saddle the horse and ride horses up to get the cows and round them up and bring them down the thing. And so you had to know how to use a horse and how to guide it and cut and move. And of course I would always want to go as fast as it could go, so I would encourage the horse to lope and then gallop and as fast as we could up the thing. And once in a while, when I wasn't careful, I would smash my leg, because of course on a fence post, because a horse would cut the corner as tight as it could without regard to the fact that my leg was an additional appendage out there in the stirrups of the saddle. But all of that combined, I remember saddling the horse and being alone and loving the horse and feeling this kinship and looking in its eyes and having that sense of this great animal which could move me at great speeds and provide that freedom, combined with the freedom of pasture. And during the haying season, we were busy all day. We went out and would haul bales and so forth. But there was lots of other time when the alfalfa hadn't been cut yet, and there wasn't time to haul bales, so we had free time and stuff like that. And so that place became a sacred place for me. And in retrospect, the horses and the freedom and the lack of physical beatings was the reason, at least the ones I can identify right now, about why it was so sacred. So the reason I encourage you with this today at the Light Rope is whether you have a farm to go to or a park or a corner of your own place, find and create a sacred space. Some find it in books. Some find it in, fantasy. Some find it in closing themselves in the room and playing with dolls, or playing with toys, or imagining worlds of pretend things. My brother and I did that a lot when we were home, and that safety as a refuge from the oppressiveness of whatever it is that you're struggling with. For me, all my adult life, for 40 years now, it's been depression. And I didn't know it until the last 5 years. So 35 years, I guess, it went undiagnosed. And I was battered about by the throes of that depression and the feeling of worthlessness because of the physical beating and not being enough and all of that stuff. But the refuge provided for me by Star Valley that summer was precious even then, and I didn't know why. Precious beyond my ability to describe. And finally now, as I understand my depression and understand and can put into context all that happened to me, I now see why it was so precious and beautiful to me. So my encouragement for you today is to think about and find yourself your safe space, your precious, sacred space, and use it on purpose as a refuge and a place to build your strength and explore your opportunities. We'll see you tomorrow.